Hello, everybody. I'm John Selders. I'm known by many titles. I am Bishop John Selders. I pastor a church, Amistad United Church of Christ in the city of Hartford, Connecticut. I'm also Dean John Selders. I'm a member of the Dean of Students office at Trinity College here in Hartford, Connecticut. And I'm also the co-founder of Moral Monday CT, a social justice grassroots organization that does its work at the nexus of the movement for Black Lives Matter, and the larger, broader social justice movement under the banner of Moral Monday. And I want to talk to you about what I'm often asked. I'm from St. Louis, and so my connection to the movement and the movement for Black Lives in particular is because of this connection I have with St. Louis. It's my home. And so when we got the word around Michael Brown in August 2014, I went home to be with what I call my nieces and nephews on the streets during that time. And I'm often asked, what happened? Why did the movement become so big and take on a form with legs and structure, if there is structure? We know about it now because of Ferguson. As many of you may or may not know, Black Lives Matter was literally a hashtag that was used between friends, a group of African American women in the Bay Area, in response to the acquittal of George Zimmerman, who was the shooter in the Trayvon Martin case in 2013. So a number of this whole idea of Black Lives Matter and it becoming a thing didn't really spout any legs and feet and arms and structure until after the shooting of Mike Brown. And people say, what made that so different? And I'd like to talk to folk and tell them why I think, at least in part, it became what it became. Many of you may or may not know Dred Scott and the Dred Scott decision. Dred Scott was an enslaved black man who was enslaved in the state of Missouri. Missouri was a slave state, and then had crossed into a free state and had been ultimately granted his freedom. He and his wife, Harriet, had been granted their freedom. And then they returned back to the state of Missouri where they were re-enslaved. And that over time, that was pursued by the courts and ultimately ascended to the United States Supreme Court. And in 1857, the court ruled on the decision. And in the majority statement made by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at that time, his name was Roger Taney, he said that there is no law that for blacks that white people were bound to respect. This idea of respect carries a huge understanding for African Americans and black folk in our context. And of course, the first place the statement was read was at the old courthouse in St. Louis, where Dred and Harriet lived. They lived in the St. Louis region. So I like to say it like this. In the city of St. Louis, there was a pall that set on in and around the whole entire area of this idea that black people had no rights, that white people were bound to respect. The continued, as we now know in Ferguson, of cities and towns in and around the city of St. Louis who used what I call the modern day shakedown of pulling you over for some minor infraction of the law and then making money using these minor infractions to both fine and court costs and fees and ultimately arrest largely black and brown and black men in particular in that region. And I think, Fannie Lou Hamer said there's a point at which you can just get sick and tired of being sick and tired. And what happened in Ferguson, that hot August afternoon and evening, while Mike Brown's body laid in the middle of the street for 4.5 hours under that August sun, my nieces and nephews decided they had just had enough. They had gotten sick and tired of being sick and tired. And it turned into raw energy and action and emotion and feeling that took on feet and legs and voice. And so I believe in part that's why the Black Lives Matter movement took on this kind of now position and perspective. It's because of that Dred Scott case and this idea of respect.